So one summer when I was in camp, Ben Magnet did a terrible thing to me.
All right, guys. So
you got your nose job?
Yeah.
So it's
Sparkz.
Do Revenge, the latest Netflix film with Maya Hawke, and damn it, I'm so unprepared today. The other actress's name escapes me.
Camila Mendes
is out now. Not quite something we generally lean to more genre stuff, but every now and then kind of fall into this. So if you have not seen this one, up to you, but don't watch this. Don't rewind, pause it, watch it later, bookmark us, whatever you want to do. Pause it, go see it, go watch it.
Whatever you want to do, Ben.
So, real quick, the director of this movie, Jennifer Caitlin Robinson, was the writer of Thor: Love and Thunder with Taika Waititi.
Nice.
So that's where some of that good comedy comes from.
I can see it.
Yeah.
All right. So, what did we think of Do Revenge? Okay, one of you guys.
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I was enjoying it most of the time. It has a really glaring blight to me, and then just a couple of other weak spots. But overall, I think it's held strong by its two leads, and it's very aware of what it's doing, and I think smartly done for the most part.
I agree. I had a pretty good time. I think for the type of movie it is, it felt long to me. I definitely felt like towards the 3/4 act that I'm like, we still got like more to go, right? And then like we have like a whole nother act with the whole party. I'm like, I enjoyed the end, but I definitely felt this could have been a little shorter. We could have trimmed some time. I like 90% of the jokes work. I really like the leads. There's not a lot of like depth. It's a really fun and fluffy movie with a lot of great comedy jokes, but it's very surface level, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing.
I won't respond to that, but I won't respond to that after Brandon says what he thinks.
I really enjoyed this. I had a good time with this. I wouldn't agree with it's very surface level though.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the assessment either. I think it's deceptively seeming simple, but I think it handles. There are some things I think it handles exceptionally well, like the concept of her chasing status, like her poorness. Like, it would have been easy to leave this concept of I never really belonged at the door. She could have just been one of the rich girls. Mm-hmm. But the way that informs on her decisions, the way that informs on her background and who she is and how she became who she is at the point in the film, I think is actually done really well, rather than keeping it at like it had a little bit more to dig into its characters than I think
a traditional
one of these would have.
I'll agree with that. Sure.
I think it chewed on the idea of who they are and why they are who they are a little more than movies of this fair tend to. And I really like the idea of when the movie starts, there's a sense of like, who is a bad person and who is not a bad person.
Yeah, okay.
And like, Andrea seems like, you are told pretty early, like, some of them are protecting Andrea because they know, like, this is not her house. She is not rich. And like, she finds out that someone is going to blab about that, and she destroys them before they can. And you're like, okay, but who's the bad person here? And the same thing happens with Max in the leak of the video. They don't tell you in that first scene. They make it present very, very much like Max is innocent. So that you're left in a lingering space of like, okay, but did he get hacked? You know?
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
Because it plays with the vague idea of like, who's in the wrong, who isn't in the wrong. You don't get a definitive answer on Max until much later.
That's true.
And when you get it, I find it interesting you get it through the sister. So I think like there's a lot of thought in the way these characters are motivated, why they're motivated, what they're doing. And I do think that there's almost a rewatch value that we kind of get a glimpse of because of some of the flashback stuff. But once you know the twist, that scene in the bed specifically, where she's like, "You're just like me, Eleanor. That's why I like you." And her being really sad and saying, "I know," hits different in retrospect of the twist.
That's true. Yeah,
I agree with that. I really have nothing to add to that. I think you're absolutely right.
I'll talk about my biggest problem with the film, which is there's the part where they leak his texts, and in a mad dash to save face, they come up with a polyamory angle. I have several loved ones in my life who are polyamorous, and I didn't appreciate that the angle that they take and the way they handle it very much feeds into the societal norm that polyamory is just an excuse for cheating. Because of the way they present it, without any counterpoint, without any extra weight to it, it becomes just, this allows me to cheat. This allows me to sleep around rather than like what polyamory really is to people who are involved in polyamorous relationships. And that sucked. And it sucked because it also hurt the characters of the group around Max. When we get to the end of the movie, I kind of don't give a shit that Tara and the rest have turned against Max, because they are just enablers. Like, they are not now good people. Because they did this one thing where all the evidence was made so overtly too much that they have now turned on Max, does not make them good people, does not make them doing the right thing. It just means that the meal ticket was over for hanging around with Max, and it was time to cut him loose because he was just going to drag them down. Their handling of that crisis, where they rally, not only them, but specifically Tara, the girl he's dating at the time, who's supposed to be Drea's best friend, rallies to come up with the polyamory angle, even though she literally just learned he's been cheating on her. At least that's the implication. And she comes up with it and feeds it and gives it out in the same day without anything weighed against it. Makes it so that later, when you get to the scene where Tara's trying to be there for Drea and like be supportive and say like, I left you this space and I feel bad and I got sucked into the social circle, rings hollow, because like, you don't have that same balance of care for another person and do what you did in the same day of learning about those texts. Because it also means it happened to Drea. Like, it happened to her and it happened to Drea. She knows that because those texts are out there. She doesn't check on Drea then. She doesn't reach out. She doesn't take any, like, they become more unlikable because of the way that whole situation plays out. And it makes me like, okay, I guess they're cool with them now, but what does that mean to me? I'm glad that they're not very featured in the epilogue of the film, although they have the moment at the party where they turn on Max. It's not like we see Eleanor and Drea going to hang out with them or something. Very glad of that, because that would have felt really shitty. But that's like my biggest blight, is that I think where I think characters are really well thought out for their motivations and who they are and complex, that kind of circle that surrounds Max, that's not his sister, pretty poorly etched out, pretty poorly.
That's what I'm talking about.
And it feels like they try to handle Tara with some nuance, but it doesn't work in light of the polyamory scene.
Sure, I don't think that's the intention, though. I think the intention of the film is supposed to be like, this is what like a teenager's reading of polyamory is, to save face. I don't disagree, though. It didn't disrupt my enjoyment, I guess I should say. However, I think I took it as the movie was intending it to be. You know?
No, explain.
No, because the movie the movie wants you to like Tara and everyone in the part, and when they turn on Max, they want you to like those characters. They want you to be endeared. The movie wants you to be to turn around on those characters, and that's how that's how I took the film. Right, I was not thinking of the larger kind of what that scene was meant to, and what that scene inadvertently informs, because I don't think it was trying to. I don't think the purpose of that scene is to make those characters forever unlikable. I think that's an accidental feature of how they handled it, and I didn't take it as, and because of that, I didn't take it I didn't take it like you did. If that makes sense now.
Sure, I get that. I think my problem with it really stems from I like films like this. I think if we're going to keep making films about topics that involve specifically like it's not sexual assault, but like sexual abuse scandals. This is him leaking a private sexual video of her. And as Russ correctly points out later, Drea doing what she did also left all those girls vulnerable to everyone else because of the photos and videos that were in those texts, without thinking about them. But those things are so lightly touched on, and so cavalierly handled. I just think it's more important to recognize that like there's the abuser and then there's the people that enable the abuser. And like Max is only powerful because of that group around him as well. Max is done that day with those texts if that group doesn't help him.
Mm-hmm.
But they did. They know he's shitty. The texts show he's shitty. Either some of them knew about it beforehand or they didn't, or they learned of it that day. They still protect him. That's a choice. And I don't feel like those characters are handled with the sense of consequence of being an enabler of abuse that Drea is, or Eleanor is, or even Gabby is. But they're not. And I think that's where it's 2022, and I feel like we need to be better about not just focusing on abusers are bad, but enablers need to recognize responsibility and work against them. Because while they do turn on Max at the end, they also take no action to lead to that conclusion. Mm-hmm. That happens only after the evidence has been completely projected forward.
Sure.
That's my main thing, is like, you know, abusers get really powerful because of enablers. And these kinds of like really harmful and bad things that will lead teens not necessarily to do the things that Maya Hawke and Drea do in this movie, but maybe commit suicide or things like that. When enablers bolster them, that's dangerous. And so the film kind of playing loosely with that concept is the part where I'm like,
yeah,
that could have been done better.
It's kind of the problem when you're making like a light comedy and you have something like this, like you can't take it too seriously or else the movie. It's like when the car wreck happens. Like you think the movie's about to turn into like a horror movie.
That's true.
But it doesn't.
That's true. And like it does need to stay into that comedy zone. But like there are ways to not like make a thesis statement on enablers and still reckon with these characters and the consequence of their involvement and their actions. And the film just isn't interested in doing that. And I think that's an important puzzle piece to the extension of the story. Like the trauma that is enacted on Drea and Eleanor only happens because not just of the abusers that do these things to them, but also the enablers who are around those abusers. Drea is only that kind of person to Eleanor or in their history because of the people who pushed her to be, who enabled her to be. So that's the kind of thing where it's like there was a way to treat it better. And I think the polyamory one bothers me personally, again, just because there's people I care about who I understand a lot about that culture through them. And I understand the prejudices that exist against it because from an external perspective, without knowing people in it, it's very easy for our culture to interpret it as it is simply an excuse for sleeping around and not a serious engagement of separate relationships.
So it's like the bisexual conversation, Brandon. Just like that.
No, I understand. I think
real quick, Brandon. My only problem that I think triggers me about that is because polyamory is not represented very often in young teen films. Almost never is it taken in with any kind of actual presence or tone. And it's kind of progressive in a sense to even include the word polyamory and the concept of it in this film. And like what they're pushing for, I think the thing about it is the framing of it from the group getting all the students on board. It feels like a gag. It feels like a scam.
Yes. Yeah.
When what they're saying isn't wrong. That is how people who are in polyamorous relationships are supposed to feel. Like, yeah, it's okay to be this kind of open as long as these are consenting parties. But it feels like it's a trick. And that's why it just rubs me the wrong way in that.
It's more like
display.
Becomes like a plot point.
I don't want to live in the negative, so I'll leave it at that.
Sarah Michelle Gellar is in this movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She's what's the movie where Lisa Kudrow plays like
Easy A.
Easy A. I felt like Easy A.
It did feel like Easy A. I found it the same thing.
Maybe the most Neil Jobson movie I've heard in my entire life. Every 2 minutes there's a new song playing in this movie. It's all over the place. And like, all over the place. Either half the track is from 10 Things I Hate About You, or it's modern pop that I don't like. I just found it very interesting that like, you know, teen movies have a lot of like, you know, like music in it, but like, man, this was like Suicide Squad levels of like, not bad music, but like every 2 minutes there's a new song playing. And I'm like, guys, can we just live? Can we just live in people talking for a minute, please? We don't need to have Joan Jett playing in every single teen movie.
I'm still processing a lot of what you said, Sparkz. I'm sorry. Wait, you threw me so far away from the movie and into a much deeper conversation that I was not prepared to have. That I'm trying to reel back into the movie.
I'm sorry.
We can't be getting too real on Do Revenge.
No, it's fair. It's a very particular bug that got it under my skin.
Nah, bro.
I think what Do Revenge does very well is Eleanor and Andrea as characters, the kind of back and forth of who is really our protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because we follow Drea at the start of the movie, but our narrator is Eleanor, who we don't meet until later on in the film, which is really interesting.
They're both narrators.
They're dual narration.
Do they do their
they're dual narrations. I was kind of annoyed because I hate narration in movies, but like this one wasn't that bad. But it was both of them talking.
God, I remember none of Drea's.
No, yeah, literally Drea talked, and then like, the second that we see Maya Hawke, she's like, "Oh, we're both narrating this movie." That's why. No, it's both.
The thing that I liked about Maya Hawke's narration, the reason why I think it stands out more than Drea's, is that Maya Hawke Eleanor has this bit when she's in the bathtub and she's talking about how I thought I would feel better, and I don't. And like that's the only real kind of real substantial narration that you really need in this movie. Yeah. Because most of the narration is kind of just explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it and how much they like each other, really. But
sometimes funny quips here and there, but like, yeah.
Yeah, but like Maya Hawke's narration is towards after the twist is more substantial, which is why I think it's probably the most memorable narration in the movie.
Yeah.
I think so. I think Maya stands out to me because I thought about it earlier in the film when she first shows up and she says she doesn't know it, but we're about to become best friends, which is like you're sneak into that. She's not saying this in retrospect. This is her plan. She's doing this on purpose, which gives you like a small window into the twist that will come.
The psychosis.
And I think she does it very well. I really like it. We need to talk about Sophie Turner's absolutely unhinged cameo.
Yeah, Sophie Turner,
which is
Cersei,
probably
Sansa Stark showing up.
Which is probably some of the.
That's who that was.
Yes,
you don't watch Game of Thrones. I don't. Oh, but she was what?
Jean Grey.
I was like, wait, what movies is she? She's
Jean Grey.
Failed Jean Grey. Rest in peace, Sophie.
Yeah, absolutely unhinged.
Love it.
Probably, frankly, one of my biggest laughs just because of the framing of it, where she's like, I don't even know what cocaine looks like. And then she's got her best friend holding the bag, sobbing in the back, like, she doesn't even know. Just so out of control. I thought it was really good. Like, that's a good use of a bizarre cameo.
I liked her first cameo, and then when she shows up and she's in rehab, she's like, I actually did get addicted to cocaine. So thanks for that. I'm like, oh my God, you ruined her life.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And then she's just got the picture she's painting that she hates her. Every time I think we've seen the last of her, she showed up for like one more time.
Who's the girl who Drea goes to see in the rehab? What's her name? Carissa. So she's on Love, Victor. I was actually really happy to see her in this movie.
Nice.
I think she's really great in Love, Victor. Didn't get a lot to do, so I was happy to see more.
Did you recognize Russ from this Marvel? Kamran?
Hell yeah. Yeah, good.
I liked his little paint scene with Drea. I also liked it when it was in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Hell yeah. It's my favorite romantic comedy. A lot of 10 things in this movie, which is not a bad thing.
It felt like there were a lot of nods to like this kind of fare.
Yeah.
Before.
You mentioned, someone mentioned, I think Ryan, you mentioned the pacing of the film. And I think once the movie gets about halfway through the second act and hasn't gotten to the twist yet,
yes,
the movie slows down. There's a very specific slowdown that this movie takes. I don't think it should. I actually think it probably should tighten that up and get to the twist faster. We make it a tighter movie, and probably 2 hours was a little bit too long for this movie.
For me, I felt that.
I'll say what I think it is the. It's hard for me to say like this should go because I kind of really love the acting in this moment, but it's the birthday scene. It's
the mushroom.
No, the birthday.
Oh, the birthday.
It's Drea confronting her at the birthday, and Eleanor embracing the group. That all doesn't feel like it feeds into the story of who Eleanor is anyway. Like, yeah, she's enjoying it, but like the next time we see her after the birthday party is when we already know the twist. And she's back on that. It doesn't even matter. She wants to take all of them down anyway. That's part of her plan, is to ruin their lives too. So it doesn't really click for this concept of really what it feels like it's there for is to just push Gabby away from her and make Eleanor feel bad in that sense. Yeah. The only thing I really like about it is the acting between Maya Hawke and Drea, because I think she's really good in that scene when she's crying and saying, you didn't even remember my birthday and I told you yesterday.
That was really
and it does feel like that is tissue you need for the concept of like when Drea says, I think you really want to be my friend, you don't want to hurt me. At the end, for that to work, kind of feels like it needs that emotionally, but otherwise like the birthday party like whole segment feels like it just slows down from getting to the twist.
Yeah, because you have the idea that like and after that scene you get the idea like I actually was going to drop this whole thing because I thought she had changed, but then it turns out she didn't. Like, well, the thing about the movie that I quite liked was how it dove into narcissism. I think it actually does have quite an interesting look. Not really anything to say because what's there to say, but like a kind of an interesting look at narcissistic people, and how we're basically following one as our main character, and we're not cued into how narcissistic she is until she has that. Really, until she tells Conrad to go down on her while she's looking at the thing. Like that's kind of when we really get the sense of like, oh, she doesn't give a shit at all. She is like laser focused on destroying
revenge.
Her friends.
Right.
I thought that was pretty interesting. I liked that aspect of the movie quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like you get glimpses, and this is kind of what I was talking about. Like what's interesting about the movie is like you don't really get a sense fully of how bad Drea is. You get glimpses, but also you believe she's been wrong. So it's like there's all these levels to it, and it's like shitty people can be hurt by shitty people, and also hurt other people. Yeah. And Drea lives in that space. I think the movie's greatest success is that the goal of the film and the goal of our main characters feels achieved by Drea and Eleanor having it out at the bonfire, regardless of the getting revenge on Mac's part. It's satisfying to have getting revenge on
cherry
Max
on top
because he's a piece of shit. So it's satisfying to see him absolutely destroyed at the end. But it doesn't feel like it's the goal of the film at that point.
Yeah.
The goal of the film was recognizing for both of the characters that neither of them want to be consumed in their hate. They actually just want to genuinely care about each other because they already did. And they don't want to continue to hurt each other because of their past pain, but move forward from it together.
Revenge has consumed them.
Rare that stays the message. Yeah. Usually it'll still just be about Max, whatever his last name is, must die. That same
John talking about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than about their friendship being repaired and the old wounds being healed over. And
right.
That's the movie's great success, I think.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised that when like the turn for the movie really is when in that kind of that messaging is when Drea tells everyone that who Eleanor was at that Nosy Nora, and so like she as soon as Eleanor leaves, Drea goes right after her. She's like, shit.
My bad.
I didn't want to do this. I don't know why I did this. This was awful. I want to be your friend, and I think you want to be my friend too. And
it works because you've seen Drea do this to other people. Sophie Turner, Allegra at the beginning of the film. You've seen her do that to other people, but this is the first time where you feel like she's doing it, and she's critically thinking about herself and why she's doing it. And when she watches Nora be hurt by it and leave the room, she feels that pain, which she just hasn't been connected enough to a person to feel. in a long time, and that motivating her to say like, I really don't want to do any of this anymore. Works. I think that's a hard landing to get, and they do land that plane.
Obviously we're familiar with Maya Hawke because of like Stranger Things and other things, but like I'm not really familiar with Camila Mendes, except she's from Riverdale. I know she's one of the ladies on Riverdale. I think she's awesome. I really like her in this movie. Yeah. She plays like a bitch very well. I can see why she's Veronica and or Betty. She's one of those characters.
She's Veronica.
She's the bitchy one, sure. Yeah.
She feels complicated at the same time.
Yeah. Like she's rich.
She's not just it's reductive, but she's not just Regina George from Mean Girls. There's more going on under that surface.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think she's excellent. Whenever the chemistry between her and Maya Hawke is really great. I kind of honestly I found myself a lot of time wanting to live in that chemistry. Regardless of the story. When the twist happens and it turns out that Maya Hawke was kind of the instigator of this whole thing. Well, not the sex tape, but like the she wants revenge on Andrea. Like the idea of like I was sad because I was like, oh, I'm not going to live in this chemistry any longer because that's just not what the movie is going to be. And I think that's a testament to how good their chemistry is, how electrifying it is when they are together, being together, just the two of them. It's very compelling. And I think that Camila Mendes is fantastic and a bona fide star. Like she needs hundreds of more movies. Like I'm very excited for her career. I was always excited for Maya Hawke because I love her from Stranger Things and I always wanted to see more of her. But now like both these women are wonderful and deserve all the luck in the world to get so many great careers.
Yeah. The mushroom party scene.
Very
definitely the funniest scene for me in the movie. Because like I was like the second we find out there's a bunch of mushrooms, like we're about to have a giant mushroom like party scene. Because like that's all I can want from this movie, and they did it, and it's really funny. I thought we were gonna cut away.
I really like when they go and find the mushrooms for the first time, and they're talking about different ways that they kind of want Sarah Michelle Gellar's headmaster to punish them.
Yes.
Like I want her to bury my body in the woods and then lead the search party.
Yeah. That was really good.
Like weird step on me, senpai energy.
Yeah. This movie, like I didn't realize it was rated R, and like it's not explicitly rated R, but every once in a while, yeah, they'll say like I was sitting on a towel. I was like, what? Or they say the C word a couple times, and I'm like, oh right, this is for adults. Right.
There's the bit and when they're during the mushroom party and they're trying to get like they're trying to get the messages and she's like, did they do good revenge, mommy? And I was like, oh, this is spicy.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you on mushrooms? Yeah. Are you? Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it. I love a good fun joke scene. Yeah.
I thought this was was quite a bit of fun. I didn't see the twist coming at all.
No, I thought it was great.
That's always fun.
I only suspected that Eleanor was up to more. Huh. All right. Because of her narration that she said she doesn't know we're about to become best friends. And they cheekily let you in on it, which at some point around the time we had figured out that this was a loose remake of Strangers on a Train.
Oh, yeah.
And in one of the scenes, she is reading Strangers on a Train, which is not just like a cute nod, but rather also suggesting that Eleanor literally drew up this plan from Strangers on a Train, which is fun. And I like that kind of like acknowledgement of like, yeah, we made this remake because she literally read the book.
I can do that.
I really like Maya Hawke. I think she's really great in this. I there's something I'm trying to say about her character, but I can't quite figure out what that is. But yeah, I had a good time with this one. I was happy I watched
it.
Yeah. She owns her presence in the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just think that there's some of the characters on the periphery needed to be.
Yeah, like our two leads, love them. Kamran from Miss Marvel, I think he's pretty great.
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
So she's fine. I honestly, she's fine.
It's nice to have her.
It's nice to have her.
She's got a lot to do.
Gabby is cool. I could pretty much believe the rest, to be honest.
Well, you need Max.
Well, I mean, okay, fine. He's like the bad guy.
He's a great bad guy.
He's a bad guy. Sure. The rest were like kind of like fodder to me.
I think one of my favorite scenes for Max, honestly, is the scene where he's with Eleanor and she's saying, "Tell me something you don't tell anyone else."
Oh,
And
that
he's
is
like,
that's a
"I
real
wanna-
scene.
I want to go. I want to
Backpacking.
leave all this alone and go backpacking and taking photography." And it's like he means that.
Yeah.
Like
Even
there's a
he
level, even as
recognizes-
he's shitty, like he also kind of hates his own existence.
He recognizes the facade they're all doing,
yes,
even though he's like the best at it.
and I think that's cool because again, like he with his glimpses feels multi-level
Absolutely.
rather than just like he is a shitty person. It's like he's a shitty person for reasons
Cool.
that he is a shitty person.
Yeah.
Anything else, or do you think we should call it?
Let's do a review.
What would you guys final thoughts and rate it?
I think it's a good time. Definitely in the wheelhouse of movies, not something I normally go to first, but I am glad I watched it. I would give it a solid 8.
Yeah, I really think it's executed well in a lot of ways. We didn't really touch on it, but the set design and colors and framing are all very good. They again also stand out from like the standard fare of this kind of film. It's very popping.
It turned into Wes Anderson a few times.
It makes it really nice to watch.
It's visually
because it's visually striking. Both in like the way they design their uniforms, the way the school looks, the way certain rooms look, even down to like the way they dress. Just a lot of striking ideas for the production design, and I think that helps the film a lot. I just hope we get to a point where we can do films like this and also be more thoughtful about what we're saying about how abusers exist in the system and how enablers are responsible as well for what part they either play or choose not to play in the actions that occur. But I would give it an 8 out of 10. It certainly sails on the backs of its leads.
True.
I agree with a lot of what you both said, so I won't reiterate that. I will say a couple of things real quickly that I noticed and I just remembered. The needle drops, too many needle drops. The driving scene's horrendous.
Oh my god! Thank you for noticing it, because it was there specifically. I pointed at Sparkz, like they're driving. There's like no wind happening at all, and then they cut to it seeing them in the car, and then there's wind blowing. I'm like,
there is some horrendous green screen driving. The first I noticed, the very first scene we see Maya Hawke driving, it zooms in, and I noticed that the speedometer wasn't moving at all, and I was like,
yeah, good catch.
Okay, not that it should, but like make it look a little more convincing, maybe.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think you're absolutely right about like the colors popping, the way it's filmed. I think is pretty good. There's a scene specifically. There's a shot specifically that it kind of like zooms into the mushroom party, and like you see the two leads come in the cross, and I thought that was excellent.
Oh yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I love watching Maya Hawke. I'm really grateful that the two leads had such great chemistry. I would also give it an 8.
Whoop whoop. Do revenge.
All right, book club.
Do book club.